All right, let's kick off this deep dive with a clash of titans. We're talking Arsenal versus Manchester United in the FA Cup third round, January 12th. Should be electric. And to get us in the mood, we've got a whole tactical breakdown ready to go, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. We've got match details, recent form, those juicy home and away records, even delved into some offensive and defensive stats. Plus, we can't forget about the injury reports. Always throws a spanner in the works. And of course, no deep dive would be complete without peeking at those betting predictions. See what the odds makers are thinking.
They always add a little spice, don't they? Okay, let's unpack this. I think the elephant in the room, at least tactically speaking, is how these teams might line up.
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? I mean, we know Arteta's been pretty loyal to that 4-3-3 for Arsenal this season. All about possession, quick attacks, that sort of thing. But there's that Saka injury looming over everything.
Right, still a bit up in the air whether he'll be fit.
Exactly. And if he's out, that could force a major rethink, couldn't it? A 4-3-3 really relies on those wingers to stretch the play, and Saka's essential to that.
So what are the options then? What could Arteta pull out of his hat?
Well, he could slot in Emile Smith-Rowe on that left side, but that changes the dynamic quite a bit. Smith-Rowe's more of a playmaker, likes to cut inside, whereas Saka was all about that pace down the flank.
Interesting.
Could even see a shift to a 4-4-2, maybe.
Yeah.
A bit more defensive solidity, especially if they're worried about Manchester United hitting them on the break.
Hold that thought about the counterattack. Let's talk Manchester United's setup for a second. Ten Hag, he usually favors a 4-2-3-1, doesn't he?
He does, yeah.
I know.
Works well for them, generally. Quick transitions, gives Bruno Fernandes that free role to create, but their defense, well, that's another story.
Bit of a leaky faucet at the back, you might say.
To put it mildly,
Yeah.
and against a team like Arsenal, who can carve you open with a few passes, that could be their undoing.
I was thinking the same thing. You give Arsenal that much space to work with, they'll punish you.
Exactly. Now, this is where things get interesting. I reckon Ten Hag might be tempted to go with 5 at the back, maybe a 5-3-2.
To match up with Arsenal's midfield.
Exactly. Try to clog up the middle of the park, limit the space for those creative players to operate.
So we've got a potential tactical battle brewing already. Formations aside, though, you've got to look at the individuals, right? Who are the game changers in this one?
Oh, for Arsenal, it all starts with Odegaard, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He's the puppet master in that midfield, the one who sets the tempo. If he's on song, finding pockets of space, dictating play, Arsenal can control this match.
He's been in fantastic form this season, but can Manchester United disrupt him? That's the question.
That's what they'll be aiming for sure. On the flip side, though, for Manchester United, you got to think Rashford's the danger man, right?
Yeah.
Pace to burn. Can finish with either foot.
A nightmare for any defender. Get him in behind that back line and it could be curtains.
Couldn't agree more. Rashford's the kind of player who can turn a game on its head in an instant.
Oh, and let's not forget about Bruno Fernandes. Even when he's not at his best, he can pull something special out of the bag. That vision, those pinpoint passes, he's always a threat.
Absolutely. So we've got the tactical puzzle, the key players to watch, but then there's the whole psychological layer to this as well.
Oh yeah, the mental game. Can't underestimate that.
I mean, you've got Arsenal flying high in second place in the league. Manchester United, on the other hand, they're languishing down in 13th. Does league form even matter in a cup tie like this?
That's a good question. And there's no easy answer, is there? On paper, you'd say Arsenal's got all the momentum, right? They've just beat Brentford comfortably, 3-1. Showed some real resilience, even with a few key players missing.
Meanwhile, Manchester United, well, they had a rough December, didn't they? Losses to Newcastle and Wolves.
Yeah, they did. Struggled to find any consistency. But here's the thing about the FA Cup. It throws up these crazy results sometimes. It's almost like form goes out the window. It's knockout football, isn't it? Anything can happen on the day.
Exactly.
But even with that in mind, you can't ignore those losses for Manchester United. Especially that 2-2 draw against Liverpool. They were really exposed defensively in that one, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. Leaking goals. And that's got to be a worry for them coming up against this Arsenal attack.
Which is exactly what makes this matchup so intriguing. Arsenal's strength is their attacking play. That fluidity, the movement, the way they create chances. If Manchester United can't shore up that defense, we could be in for a goal fest.
No doubt about it. But, and I know you're thinking it,
Oh, I know you've got a butt coming.
Manchester United is going into this match with almost a full squad available. And we don't know about Saka's status for Arsenal, do we?
Nope, still a question mark hanging over him.
And that's massive. Saka's a difference maker for Arsenal. Their creative spark, their most dangerous attacker. If he's not 100% or if he has to miss out altogether, it completely changes the complexion of the game.
You're absolutely right. Suddenly, the stats we were looking at for Arsenal don't seem quite as intimidating, especially if Manchester United can exploit any weaknesses that might appear if Arsenal has to adjust their formation without Saka.
Exactly. That throws another layer of intrigue into the mix, doesn't it?
It does. So we've got Arsenal, the informed team, looking to keep their momentum rolling, and Manchester United almost at full strength, hoping to pull off an upset. But before we dive into those home and away records, let's talk about the Emirates. I mean, it's more than just a home advantage for Arsenal, isn't it? It's like a fortress.
It really is. It's something special. The way the crowd seemed to envelop the pitch, it creates this incredibly intense atmosphere. The players feed off that energy. Opponents have talked about feeling suffocated, like they can't think straight. It's a genuine psychological advantage for Arsenal.
So even if Manchester United comes in with a full squad and that underdog mentality, they've still got to overcome this Emirates factor.
Exactly. They've got to silence that crowd early, disrupt Arsenal's flow, and they've got to find a way to handle that pressure. Otherwise, it could be a very long 90 minutes for them.
It all adds up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at those recent home and away records, shall we? Arsenal at the Emirates, they've been dominant. Those wins against Ipswich Town and Crystal Palace, very impressive.
Very impressive.
Manchester United on the road, not so much. Lost to Wolves, lost to Tottenham. Even though they had that wild 4-3 win against Tottenham earlier in the season, conceding 3 goals away from home doesn't exactly scream defensive solidity, does it?
It doesn't, and I think it highlights the different mentalities of these two teams right now. Arsenal, they're confident at home. They control the tempo, they dictate the play. Manchester United, they've looked vulnerable on the road, struggled to contain opponents, struggled to keep their composure.
Okay, so we've got the tactical battle, the key players, the psychological factors, the Emirates factor, these contrasting home and away records. Time to crunch some numbers now, wouldn't you say? We do love a good stat deep dive.
Oh, absolutely, and I think you'll find these numbers particularly illuminating.
Hit me with them.
All right, so let's start with clean sheets. Over their last 6 games, Arsenal's boasting a 50% clean sheet probability. Pretty solid, right?
Very solid.
Manchester United, though, they're down at 20%.
Ooh, that's not great. So basically, Arsenal's keeping a clean sheet every other game. Manchester United, not so much.
Yeah, pretty much. And if we look at goals scored and conceded per game, it really paints a picture, doesn't it?
Lay it on me.
Arsenal, they're averaging 2 goals scored per game, only letting in 0.8. Manchester United, 1.2 goals scored, but conceding 1.7.
Yikes, that's not a good ratio.
Not ideal, no.
Yeah.
It shows you where these teams are at offensively and defensively.
Arsenal firing on all cylinders. Manchester United, well, a bit misfiring, you might say.
Something like that. And the win rates over those last 6 games, well, they kind of tell the same story.
Okay, what are we looking at?
Arsenal's sitting pretty at 67%. Manchester United, they're down at 17%.
Ouch. So purely based on these numbers, it's looking like a pretty one-sided affair, isn't it?
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But remember what we talked about earlier. Cup ties, they can be unpredictable. And there's a little wrinkle in this story.
Oh, do tell.
Well, think about those squad situations we were discussing. Manchester United, pretty much everyone's available.
And Arsenal are sweating on Saka's fitness.
Exactly, and that could be a massive swing factor. I mean, he's crucial for Arsenal, isn't he?
Oh, he's their creative hub, their main attacking threat.
Exactly. And if he's not 100% or if he misses out altogether, well, Arteta might have to completely rethink his approach.
So suddenly, those stats we were admiring for Arsenal don't seem quite as ironclad.
Exactly. Especially if Manchester United can capitalize on any disruption to Arsenal's usual rhythm, if they can exploit any gaps that open up.
Now it's getting interesting.
It is, isn't it? The big question is, can Manchester United actually do it? Can they put it all together against a top team like Arsenal? That's what we'll have to wait and see.
Well, on that note, let's talk about something that's always a hot topic before a big match.
You mean?
Betting predictions. I know some folks out there love to see what the odds makers are saying, so let's dive in. No surprises here, really. Arsenal are the heavy favorites.
Which makes sense.
Right. Everything we've talked about, their form, the home advantage, the stats.
Logically, they should be the favorites.
Exactly. But for those who like a little flutter, there are a couple of interesting options out there. I was looking at the parlay bets, combining a couple of predictions into one. Bit riskier, but a bigger payout if you get it right.
Higher risk, higher reward, right?
Exactly. So you could combine an Arsenal win with, say, over 2.5 goals in the match. That's a tempting one, isn't it? Given Arsenal's attacking potential. and Manchester United's, well, defensive frailties.
Yeah, I can see the appeal, though I'm always a bit cautious with those parlay bets. They're not for the faint of heart.
Definitely not. And for those who prefer to play it a bit safer, there's always the double chance.
Oh yeah, good old double chance. Covering your bases.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in this case, you could go with an Arsenal win or a draw. You could even combine that with both teams to score a bet. I mean, with the attacking talent on display, that feels like a pretty safe bet, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. A good option if you want to dip your toes in without going all out. But remember, those odds are just one piece of the puzzle.
Right. They reflect broader trends, sentiment, that kind of thing, but they don't guarantee anything.
Exactly. They shouldn't be the only factor in your decision-making.
They're a starting point, not the finish line. You've got to consider all the factors, tactics, key players, that psychological edge, and then, well, take a leap of faith.
That's part of the fun, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Tactics, players, stats, even the betting odds.
We have.
But let's zoom out for a second, take a wider view. What does this match actually mean for these two clubs? Not just in terms of the FA Cup, but their overall season objectives. What's at stake here?
It's a great question. And I think for Arsenal, a win here would be a real statement. It would show that they're serious contenders on multiple fronts.
They're right in the mix for the Premier League title, too, aren't they?
They are. And a deep run in the FA Cup would only add to their momentum.
Boost their confidence, too.
Exactly. For Manchester United, though, I think this match could be a turning point. It could go either way.
How so?
Well, they've been underperforming all season, haven't they? But a win against a top team like Arsenal, it could be the spark they need.
Give them that belief that they can compete with the best.
Exactly. But on the flip side, a heavy defeat? Well, that could be a real blow to their morale. It could raise more questions about their ability to challenge the top teams, and that could send them spiraling even further down that table.
So the stakes are high for both teams. It's not just about progressing in the cup. It's about, well, making a statement, I guess.
It's about proving a point. And that brings us to another crucial element, doesn't it? The fans. What's the atmosphere going to be like at the Emirates? What are the expectations, the anxieties among the supporters?
I think the Arsenal fans are going to be buzzing, aren't they? I mean, they haven't won a major trophy in a while, and with Arteta at the helm, there's a sense that this could be their year.
Yeah, there's definitely a buzz around the Emirates these days, and I think those fans will be right behind their team, pushing them on.
It's going to be electric.
Electric.
Yeah.
But for Manchester United fans, I think it's a bit more complicated. They're desperate for a win, aren't they? They want to see signs that things are turning around.
But they've also been let down a few times this season.
Exactly. So it's a mix of hope and apprehension, I'd say.
A recipe for a tense and thrilling atmosphere, then. Okay, let's bring it back to the match itself. What should our listener be watching for? What are those key tactical battles, those individual matchups, those moments that could decide the outcome?
Well, first and foremost, pay attention to how both teams line up.
Those formations?
Yeah. Will Arsenal stick with that 4-3-3, or will Arteta tweak it depending on Saka's situation? Will Manchester United go for a more defensive approach, maybe that 5-3-2 we discussed?
It's like a chess match, isn't it?
It is. And those individual duels are just as important.
Within the match, you mean?
Yeah. Can Odegaard find the space to pull the strings for Arsenal, or will Manchester United's midfielders shut him down?
And what about Rashford? Can he use that pace to get in behind? Can Arsenal's center backs keep him quiet?
Those individual battles can swing the momentum, you know.
Oh, yeah. And don't forget those set pieces.
Oh, absolutely. Both teams have got players who can deliver a dangerous ball, and they've both shown some vulnerability defending them.
A goal from a corner or a free kick could easily be the difference. So much to watch for. It's going to be tactical. It's going to be physical. It's going to be a mental test for both teams. But before we wrap up this part, let's have some fun. If you had to put your money where your mouth is, who do you think is going to win this one?
Oh, the million-dollar question. Look, based purely on form, home advantage, squad depth, I'd have to lean towards Arsenal. They're the favorites for a reason.
Oh, big Haas! I sense a butt coming.
But, and it's a big but, Manchester United, they've got that unpredictable factor, don't they? They've got the players who can hurt you, and in a cup tie, anything can happen.
So you're saying don't rule out a Manchester United upset?
I wouldn't put my house on Arsenal, let's put it that way. This is football. After all, we've seen crazier things happen.
That's what keeps us on the edge of our seats, right? But okay, last thought here. We've covered the tactics, the players, even those juicy betting odds. But for our listener, someone who maybe doesn't live and breathe football every day, what should they really be watching for in this match? What makes this one special?
That's a good question. I think this is a chance to see two completely different styles of play go head-to-head. Arsenal, under Arteta, they're all about that patient build-up, that controlled possession, quick passing,
That tiki-taka style.
Yeah, exactly. Manchester United, though, they can be much more direct. They'll look to hit Arsenal on the break, use that speed they've got up front, Rashford especially.
So it's a clash of philosophies almost.
In a way, yeah. And it's going to be fascinating to see which one comes out on top.
Right. Can Arsenal dictate the tempo, or will Manchester United disrupt that rhythm?
And then there's that mental side of it, too.
The Emirates factor.
Exactly. Can Manchester United handle that pressure? Can they silence the crowd, maybe even nick a goal early on? That could change everything.
It could. And that's where those individual battles come into play.
Yeah. Ødegaard versus Manchester United's midfield, Rashford against Arsenal's backline. Those moments can be decisive.
Even if you're not a tactical genius, you can still appreciate those key moments, can't you?
Oh, absolutely. Those little battles within the bigger battle, that's what makes football so exciting.
Totally agree. So, to our listener, as you get ready for this FA Cup clash, remember, it's more than just a game. It's a story waiting to be written.
With heroes and villains, ups and downs.
Yeah. Pay attention to those tactical choices, watch those key players, soak up that atmosphere.
And enjoy the ride.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back next week to break it all down. Until then, may the best team win.